When you live in Yakima, Washington, this beautiful view of these foothills can be your view on your commute to work every morning. It's very common in Yakima to have a through street, the intersection not quite match up all the way. And it was explained to me recently that that's because these streets were originally just the tractor trails through the apple orchards, and then those tractor trails were just paved over, and that they weren't really ever intended, when originally planned, to become through streets and busy roads. It's good to see that grocery stores still have children's rides out in front, the way they did when I was a child. It looks like they're 50 cents. No. It looks like they're 50 cents now, though. They were a dime in the 70s. One of the many differences between Washington State and Minnesota is that Minnesota can only sell beer and wine in liquor stores. And in Washington State, you can see right here, they can sell beer and wine in any grocery store or convenience store. Here's an entire aisle. In an ordinary grocery store. And here's an entire wine kiosk. Right next to the fresh produce. You would never see this in Minnesota. Here we are on Yakima Avenue in and near downtown Yakima, Washington. Looking farther down Yakima Avenue, we can see part of the Larson Building, the tallest building in Yakima, which I believe is 11 floors. Lariat Barbecue, a local landmark, a business that's been there since at least the 70s when I was a small child, is still in business. We can see farther down Yakima Avenue. The Yakima Avenue, when I was a child in the 70s and a teenager in the early 80s, was, for a 1 mile strip, the avenue that teenagers would drag in their cars just back and forth for hours on a Saturday night. That practice was banned, I believe, sometime around the 90s or perhaps the year 2000, as the police just started to patrol it more heavily and ban dragging the avenue. I myself did not drive as a teenager, so that's not something I was really able to participate in. Hey, free parking. You won't find that in downtown Minneapolis or St. Paul. The Yakima Mall, from my childhood in the 70s and my teenage years in the early 80s, is now just entirely converted into lofts and apartments and a hotel. But the public library in Yakima looks much as it did from the outside, as it did when I was a kid in the 70s. I am sure you can see behind me that the sportsman is still trying to shoot up the place. He hasn't hit anyone yet, but he is endlessly trying. Yakima, Washington is filled with these little stand-alone drive-through coffee kiosks. I just don't think this business model would work in Minnesota. If we have them in Minneapolis and St. Paul, I haven't seen it. Here behind me is yet another just drive-through coffee hut. This is something that I'm seeing all over Yakima, Washington, and is both a difference between Yakima, Washington, and Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, and also something that is different between when I was growing up in Yakima in the 70s and was a teenager in the 80s, and now the year 2018. And there is yet another one.